Welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast by Third Wave, where we explore how psychedelics can be integrated into culture for the evolution of humanity. This is your host, Paul F. Austin, and today I'm speaking with Nichol Bradford, co-founder of Transformative Tech.
So if your job is a collection of tasks, when AI is coming for your tasks, it feels very threatening. But when, your job is actually your creations and your outcomes, if AI helps you get better, more deeper creations and outcomes, then you're excited for it to take the tasks. So we have to sort of change what we think a job is. We're bound by old metaphors.
Hey listeners, this is Paul F. Austin, founder and CEO of Third Wave, and welcome back to the show. Today we're diving into the fascinating intersection of psychedelics, technology, and human potential with my guest, Nichol Bradford. Nichol stands at the forefront of human potential and artificial intelligence, accelerating human transformation through technology investments, research, and global thought leadership. She serves as executive in residence for AGI at the Society for Human Resource Management, shaping global thinking and human and artificial intelligence collaboration. She is also the co-founder and partner of Niremia Collective, an early-stage venture fund focused on human potential technologies. And she co-founded TransformativeTech.org, the largest global ecosystem of founders, investors, and innovators building tech for human flourishing. In our conversation, Nichol shares her journey from the tech industry to pioneering a community dedicated to human flourishing. We explore the possible integration of psychedelics into the tech and consciousness spaces and the role of technology in remembering our connection to nature. Nichol and I go pretty deep into the potential of AI and human intelligence collaboration and explore how these advancements can redefine not only work as we know it, but also human potential. So before we jump into this discussion, remember to follow the Psychedelic Podcast on your favorite app or like and subscribe on YouTube. You can also join our community at community.thethirdwave.co to dive deeper into the conversation and share your thoughts with us. All right, let's get into it. Please enjoy my conversation with Nichol Bradford. Nichol, it's an honor to welcome you to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to start with transformative tech. I heard about it maybe 4 or 5 years ago from a mutual friend of ours, Dina Burkit-Bayeva. I was living in the Bay at the time, and she was just getting into psychedelics and was talking about this conference that, I had to check out and go to. And I think a few years after that, we connected or met briefly at a boutique Burning Man in the desert, and then through another mutual friend, through Czar, at dinner in LA. And so I've been keen to interview you, and just curious as a starting point, what was the origin of transformative tech? Why did you start it? What sort of led you towards developing this conference community and lab for innovation?
Yeah, so just to step back a little bit, I've been in tech about 20 years, and that is in 2 buckets. The first bucket is consumer-facing software, specifically video games, but really high on engagement and community and seeing relationship online. And then the second half has been in venture building, either as transformative tech, sort of, gathering founders and investors and clinicians and people together, and also as an investor as well. So consumer-facing software and venture building. And so specifically the road to transformative tech, I was in China and I was leading operations for Blizzard Entertainment. And so that meant World of Warcraft, StarCraft. And I'd been in China about 6 years, and I was on my way back to the US and agreed to do a less than a year project to do our data center strategy from Hong Kong. I wanted to live in Hong Kong before I came back. And I had a month off, and I did three things. I was a collector of experiences. So I did these three things, which was go to Bhutan and get scuba certified in Thailand. And I decided to do one of these meditation retreat things. And I had done a little bit of meditation, but, it felt to me very hardcore. And, and I was always like a very all-in hardcore person. And so, without a lot of background, I'd been meditating a little bit on and off. But I wouldn't say I was in a spiritual community. Without a lot of background, I signed up for a Goenka course in southern Japan and went and on this retreat. To be really honest, I was just really like, I was doing it to say I did it, because other people would say, and this was before like non-spiritual people were meditating. And the idea of like going on a silent retreat seemed really like a hardcore thing to do. That was that was the consciousness with which I was doing it. And I had an unexpected, unplanned, unsought out awakening. Like, I didn't go for that. I didn't even know that it was possible. And specifically what that looked like was 6 days of a living life review, followed by 3 days of complete sheer bliss, as if the universe were flowing through my veins. And then that was followed by 4 months of the absence of internal chatter.
Wow.
Like I had no inner critic. I had no inner narrator. I didn't even have, and it wasn't because I overcame the critic, just whatever part of the brain that has that internal audio track for 4-ish months in my brain did not work. And so I sort of cold turkeyed my inner critic by no, intention of my own. And what that does is, our inner soundtrack often isn't kind. It often isn't helpful. And, it being gone and my brain not functioning that way anymore for a period of time, I got really fearless because I wasn't spooking myself every day with what might go wrong or what was wrong with me or, what my current failings were. And so I wasn't spooking myself every day. And because of that, I became incredibly happy. And, and it wasn't like a lotus eater kind of happy. It was you're not criticizing yourself every day kind of happiness. And so I was just really curious. I was also really curious about like how my brain was working, because I was definitely I was different than other people for that period of time. And so I found my way to people who could help me figure it out because I wanted to figure it out, psychologically, biologically, like from a neuroscience standpoint. I was like, what just happened to me? And also like physically and stuff. And so I found some people, began to get an understanding of what happened. My internal chatter did come back, but it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz, where once you see behind the curtain, I was able to break the belief that it was me, that voice was me, or so identified with it that you can't imagine it not being you. I wouldn't say that I'd broken it, but it's just like I saw that it might not be me. And, for me, my dad was a plumber, like I'm very far from where I grew up. And I have had and what that has done for me is I have a desire for everyone to have access to the good stuff. I don't believe that everyone should have the same stuff, because it's sort of like each according to one's interest. and that sort of thing. But I believe that everyone should have access to it. And this kind of joy. Oh, the other thing that I should say, the 3 days of bliss on retreat was also because I could feel the web of life. Like I could actually feel the web that people often describe when they take psychedelics, when they see the interconnectedness of all beings, when they see the interconnectedness to nature, or they see the great equation. I felt the web of life. My expression of it is very, or my perception of it is very nature oriented. I've met people who can see the math. Mine's not like that. Mine was very much, there is a web between us all. There's a webbing between all of us, and I could see it and feel it. And I felt profoundly connected, and that was relevant because I'd always felt very lonely before. And so that was like 3 days at all of that. And then that tapered off after like a week or so. But the absence of inner chatter lasted about 4 months. And the net of it is that because my dad is a plumber and because I've always been a big fan of technology and science as something that can support a meritocracy, something that can, support abundance, or the ability for everyone to have access to everything, I thought, well, we should use technology to spread meditation. For everyone listening, this was 2014. Right. When I came back and I started talking about this in 2014, and then, with Jeffrey started Transformative Tech in 2015 as a conference, but the year in 2014, all the meditation people against technology and meditation.
Right.
And then also I had said, well, not everyone's going to meditate. Not everyone's ready for that. And remember, like the meditators back then had really high standards of what they thought was quality meditation. It was very, in some ways, elitist, I would say. Just leave it at that. And so so I was like, well, the benefits of meditation are mental, social, emotional health. So in 2015, I was talking about finding ways to combine technology and mental health. And the mental health people were against it. And no one cared about social health. It was like something everybody thought your parents should teach you. And no one, except a few teachers, were doing emotional health. And so that's how it got started. And so the first conference was 250 people in 2015. The last one, live one, was over 1,000 people in 2019. And it was founders and investors and clinicians and psychologists. And what was really special about it is that it was really across the entire range, because I was on the hunt for all of the ways that you could use technology to support human psychological state, whether it was, measuring, mapping, measuring, protocols to influence, or ultimately really enhance and amplify. And so I became like this Wikipedia of ways that people were using technology for this. And that's how it got started.
So, and I'm curious, at what point did psychedelics come onto your radar? So the early focus, it sounds like, was on meditation, potentially neurofeedback, potentially other tools and technologies that would help to facilitate a more sort of enlightened or present state. At which point, I started Third Wave in about 2015, so around the same time that Transformative Tech was started. And when I started Third Wave in 2015, it was very stigmatized and not very acceptable at that point in time. When did you notice that more people in San Francisco, more people in the tech world, more people who were interested in sort of this biohacking aspect or element of brain health and emotional health What was your observations of when psychedelics started to like enter that conversation and be a more integral part of it?
Yeah. So, a point of clarity, I never had psychedelics at Transformative Tech. And, in part that was because it was, pre where psychedelics are today. And psychedelics are not legal in every part of the world. And I really believe that, the technology of transformation should be available to everyone. So, I very clearly was building a global organization and a global mission. And so I did not have psychedelic content. The second part of the question is sort of like, when did I notice people in the Bay, combining all of it? And I would say really sort of from the beginning. I mean, one of the things that did draw me to San Francisco was that this place had the greatest overlap of neuroscience people who are also interested in consciousness, who are also interested in tech. So, like, Boston is a bigger brain center than the Bay, but it's brain in a medical standpoint versus a human evolutionary, or human transformation standpoint. There's only 3 universities in the world that do the William James form of, or issue degrees in the William James form of transformation. The California Institute of Integral Studies being one of them, here in the Bay. And, and the William James point of view is this idea that we can change and evolve. Everywhere else, mostly that they teach psychology, it is, it's sort of as a you are who you are point of view, as opposed to who you might be. And so I think a lot of that is based on the Bay's roots in sort of like counterculture. Like there's a lot of legacy here of people experimenting. And then the personality of the city is, for better or worse, like it can breed some hubris, but the personality of the city is we can fix that. We can evolve, we can change it, we can influence it. And it's not something that you notice until you go to another city where the culture is, things always go wrong, or they might have the tall poppy syndrome or other things like that. This place really is, what if is the personality? What if we can change that? What would that look like? And so, you do get people doing things for which they have no background and they completely screw it up. That happens. Right. But you also get a lot of people who question the norms and so experiment with different things. Then that lines up really well, especially with early psychedelics or the early psychedelics movement, as well as a ton of meditation and other things that are, evolutionary for humans.
Well, and what you're speaking to reminds me a little bit of this sort of techno-optimist perspective or lens, or even effective accelerationism, which has become more in vogue over the last probably year or so, especially in San Francisco. And what I'm kind of thinking about now is when you had this enlightenment experience in your Vipassana at the Goenka experience in Japan, you mentioned this deep connection to the web of life and to nature. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what can nature teach us, or what can we learn from nature as it relates to human evolution and the role of technology in that process?
Oh my God, this is like my favorite question. First of all, one of the first things we have to learn from nature is that we are nature. That like what we've done is we've othered nature. So nature is something that you go into. We actually are nature. Whether that's the, extraordinary amount of non-human DNA and non-human life forms that we have on and inside our life form. Like we are nature. This is straight up nature. Your skin is covered with nature. You don't have to go. It's nice to go into nature, but to remember that we are nature. And so, I think I've been working on a concept that I'm calling slipstreaming. And basically, it's being human in the age of AI. And a big part of it is really reconnecting to our own, ourselves as nature, and also reconnecting to these things that our bodies do that really connect us. So an example would be, I'm obsessed with biosynchrony. And what biosynchrony is that when human beings are in rapport, their biosignals actually start to line up. So, heart rate variability aligns, pupil dilation, microfacial expression, micro movements, vocal intonation. We basically dance and sing when we're together. And there's been, significant amount of data and like real studies showing, you can like identify which teams are working together based on whether or not they micro move together. And it's not something that with the naked eye you would ever notice. It's so much more subtle than that. Sometimes people think that means that it's that, those big movements and like how to really sell someone. If your target leans forward, you lean forward. It's so much more subtle than that. We start to respirate in unison, and it happens online too. Of course, it's more pronounced in person because I would say there's the additional impact of we can smell each other, and we're inhaling one another's microbial systems. So it's more pronounced in person, but it still happens online. So, what we've been doing with each other and our desire to be together and our desire to be connected and our, evolutionary impulse to be together and be connected, because that's how you live on the Serengeti. That is older than all of the technology that has caused us issues over the last 80 years. That biology is older. And so, I believe that it can be cultivated and amplified. And through that, we can actually become more human. And I think that's what nature has to teach us, and what we can learn from nature in this time, as well as there's, really interesting things about biomimicry and I don't think it's a coincidence that if you look at a Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, fiber optic map, it looks a lot like an ecosystem map. Right. Whether it's a ecosystem in a shallow water area, or whether it's the circulatory system or the ecosystem in a forest, they all kind of look alike when you look at them. So, yeah,
these mycelial webs, in a way, are they're not like, there are certain planned cities. Like at many years ago, I went to the capital of Brazil called Brasilia, and it was actually a planned city from the 1950s, and it's shaped like a bird, right? You compare that to, let's say, London or Paris or some of these ancient cities in Europe that just sort of emerged over time. The architecture or infrastructure of those cities is much different. It's much more, in a way, aligned with, like what paths did people just walk naturally as the cities were starting to develop, rather than it feeling sort of externally imposed. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like, what is the role then of these cutting edge technologies in helping us to remember the healthiness in being deeply connected to nature, which is part of the reason I love even some of these ancient technologies like, psychedelics, like mushrooms or ayahuasca, because there seems to be a recognizable pattern where we're put in touch with an intelligence that is obviously non-human, but it's also something much more archaic or, deeper than we're used to experiencing in modern times. And in fact, I read a book a couple months ago called Ways of Being, which is all about our relationship to non-human intelligence. So the focus is really on artificial intelligence, and how a lot of the sort of mainstream discourse focuses on artificial intelligence as something that's scary and intimidating and potentially going to lead to extinction. And in fact, it has parallels with how for example, the Christian church perceived psychedelics, right? That these were drugs of evil and, influenced by Satan and would lead to
Well,
X, Y,
I would
and Z.
say recent Christian church.
Right.
Old school Christian church most likely used them.
Which, yeah, Brian makes the case of the immortality key that potentially prior to it becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire, that could have been the case. So I'm curious from kind of your perspective, like, when did you become really professionally interested in artificial intelligence? Like, when did it become something that you were like, I really want to dedicate time and energy and focus to this? And how can that relationship or our relationship with artificial intelligence help to facilitate a healing of the sort of climate and a healing of our relationship to nature?
I'll divide it into two pieces. The first part is that I've always been interested, and it's just yet another technology that can influence human potential. It's a very powerful technology that can influence human potential. So, I'm interested because of that. It also unlocks other things like, a lot of our advances in understanding the human brain and understanding the human body is because of our ability to, hyperscan, our ability to gene sequence, our ability to gene sequence microbes. So AI has a big role to play in our ability to understand our, bodies and psychology, because it adds a level of power to how much we can see, and how much we can extrapolate, and model, and then bring back to the real, to the physical world. So there's that connection. The other connection that I found interesting, before we started, we were talking a little bit about being a pioneer and how hard that is. The conversations that people are having today about mental, social, and emotional health, I think that the pandemic accelerated that by a decade. And in part, because everyone during the pandemic knew someone who was struggling or struggled themselves, it took mental health from over there to over here. So it was like, if it wasn't you, there was someone you loved who struggled and had mental health issues during the pandemic all around the world. And so, so that brought mental health home. There'd already been stuff happening before, like the high profile suicides and things like that. But that still was, people still managed to say that's their problem. But the pandemic made it our problem, everyone's problem. Then remote work made social health something that enterprise cared about, because they're trying to figure out how to keep the teams together. And so people finally cared. And then the thing that made emotional health and being human something that people actually care about and talk about was Chat GPT. I've done the unofficial anecdotal N of one test over the last decade of talking about something and seeing how quickly someone's eyes glaze over. It's just like, and now for mental, social, and emotional health, for the questions of what does it mean to be human and our emotional state, people care because these LLMs talk like we do. They respond to us in our own words. And so it's forcing people to ask the question, well, if it sounds like me, is it me? What is me? Who is me? Who is we? And so that's sort of like, what's brought it forward. So part one is, it's just the most recent technology that can be applied to the human condition. Part two is people finally actually really care. And then part three is that there's some really cool things that, we will be able to do now. What I'm doing today, so my day is broken up into sort of two parts. One, I'm a co-founder and investor in essentially transformative technologies, a $22.5 million fund. and I've invested in about 16 companies. And so we call it wellness and well-being technology, just because it's less of a mouthful than transformative tech, and people, broadly get a sense of what that is. So it gets the right things flowing towards me. The second thing that I do is that I'm now the executive in residence for human and AI enablement for the Society of Human Resource Management. And the reason why, we started this partnership, and basically where that is that I am overseeing the initiative to align thought leadership with policy, programs, product, and certifications. And some people, they think about HR and they're like, oh, that's boring, or what is that? And, and why would you do that with your tech background? What's meaningful is that SHRM has 340,000 members in 180 countries, and those people touch 326 million workers and their families every week. So these are real people. This isn't a TAM, or a SAM or a FAM or whatever. Like, these are real people who are in this intertidal moment in companies. And the reason why I think employees are really important is that there's 8.5 billion people on the planet, 3.3 billion of them, and half of them are adults, and 3.3 billion of them work for people. So work is the place where we're actually going to figure out, because where we have the most motivation to figure out, what does it mean to have AI in our lives? How does it change, what we do, how we do it? What does work look like? And so that's what I'm doing. And what I get to do with SHRM is that we're aligned on human-centered AI implementations. And so what that basically means is that there's like 3 ways that people are approaching it. One is optimizing, which is like, oh, this bot can do the job of 700 people. How many people can I fire? Which is the dominant thing that you hear out there. Or Sam just put out a quote saying that, AI can do 95% of marketing jobs. He actually said 95% of current marketing jobs. And the current's really important. But, so there's optimization, and then there's another thing that's called reinvention. And so if you think about a job as what you hope to do, plus all the things you didn't sign up for, the opportunity is to use AI to automate all the things you didn't actually sign up for, and then to refocus on driving business, the success of your business, because people need to work places and have jobs and whatever, and also connecting with your customers, internal and external. It's like, what can a group of really aligned people accomplish? And so SHRM and I are aligned on, that being, the way I think we navigate through this intertidal moment to the future. And so that's why I agreed to be their executive in residence and to lead the thought leadership alignment with everything else.
And so just to build on that, what's your, how will AGI, the development of AGI, impact the way we perceive work? In other words, for most people, especially let's say in the United States, we work to make a living, we work to have enough money to pay our bills. There's a small sliver of us that work for a deeper purpose or meaning or mission. And so I'm just curious to hear your general thoughts, as AGI becomes more integrated into the workplace, as ideally it takes over more of this, a lot of the jobs that maybe we get stuck doing but aren't necessarily in our zone of genius. How might AGI free up more internal capacity to really work on the things that we love to do or the things that we find meaningful to pursue?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what done well, it will do, or it can do. One of the things we have to talk about is what time scale is. And then another thing is just differentiating advanced superintelligence, which is, the people who are looking for the conscious superintelligence. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not we have AGI now, depending on how you define it. and that's basically as good as a human at certain tasks.
Like chess,
But,
maybe.
and so in some categories, it is as good as a human at certain tasks.
Right.
Like you see ChatGPT passing law exams and things like that. So you have to like pull that out. I mean, the real question is, or there's a couple of things. One, just because software could do something doesn't mean you won't want to. So that's first. So, if you really love, just because software can make music doesn't mean that you will no longer play an instrument because software can make music. And we actually saw this with chess. Even though software is a better chess player than any human, the amount of people playing chess has not gone down. And that movie Gambit increased it because people enjoy, chess, and so it doesn't mean you won't do it. And then in terms of work and what is work, one of our big problems right now is that, it's kind of like what I said, the way we define jobs we have it all blended together, and we don't really think about it as what we hope to do plus all the things that we didn't sign up for. Or Microsoft calls it joy plus toil. So there's a lot of things that we do that right now we're including in our jobs. And so it sounds like, it's moving from tasks to skills and is what people are saying. But I think it's moving from tasks to creations to outcomes. And so if your job is a collection of tasks, when AI is coming for your tasks, including the things you didn't sign up for, it feels very threatening. But when, your job is actually your creations and your outcomes, then if AI helps you get better, more deeper creations and outcomes, then you're excited for it to take the tasks so that you can spend more time, managing the creation. And so we have to sort of like change what we think a job is. We're bound by old metaphors. And so what does work become? I think where it's going to turn into eventually, this is a long time scale. And this middle section, I'm not saying it's not rough. That's why I'm with SHRM, because it's such a platform. And what we're doing is we're aggressively looking for cases that we can elevate so that CEOs can see and leaders can see examples of companies reducing cost, improving profitability without firing anyone, and taking off in their category. Those are the things that make people believe it's possible. It's like the 4-minute mile. Right. Until you actually see the 4-minute mile, until humanity saw the 4-minute mile, they even thought it would make you sick. They thought you'd die. And so there was the first 4-minute mile, and then there was, like when Roger Bannister did that 4-minute mile, that was impressive because no one thought it could be done. But more impressive was, 30 days later, someone else did it. And it was like the acceleration, the cluster behind it. So we need to 4-minute mile, human-centered AI adoption so that we can get to a place where, people, realize that we can have it expanding. I'm not at liberty to say the company yet, but I found a case recently where the CEO reached out to a friend of mine to help them with their implementation. It's like a major company, would recognize the name. And my friend said, well, I'll help you with your implementation, but only if you agree not to fire anyone for a year. You can make no firings, optimization fires for a year. Wow. And he agreed. What they've done so far, they're not even complete, is, with making that commitment to the employees, and everybody knowing they have at least a year to figure out how AI fits into their role. They removed $110 million in cost. Didn't fire anybody. Improved profitability. Added $11 million in profit. Didn't fire anybody. Doubled down on reinventing the value chain by how they told all those people that extra time, figure out how we drive the business, connect more deeply with customers, internal and external. Two things: drive the business, connect with the customers. And so now they're basically like destroying their competitive cohort. So we need to take cases like that and 4-minute mile them. So other CEOs and other leadership teams go, oh, okay, like I'm going to make the commitment. Because also on the other side, like you can't just, drag people around, but you have to give them a chance. Like you have a year, we're going to support you. Singapore just did a thing where they're educating, they have free AI education for every person over 40.
Wow.
Like it doesn't matter what you're doing. Like we're going to educate you on how to use AI if you're over 40, not because young people don't need it, but they're assuming that young people will do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, AI is the future. And so the government is paying for AI education for every citizen over 40.
It's like the new internet literacy, right? When the internet came out, 30 years ago, we had to quickly learn how to adopt to it and send emails and
Yeah.
those who are in the younger generation who are 15, 20, 25, it's pretty easy to adapt. But those who are over 50 or 60, it's a little trickier and yet necessary for them to still thrive in, this sort of uncertain and emerging world.
Except I think it's going to be easier. There's a whole thing. We have because of early DOS and early computers, we have a whole belief that upskilling is hard. But the main thing that this new technology interfaces are, because it's human, because it's more conversational on how we interact with it. It's basically just going to be vocal. Ultimately, basically you just ask questions. So you're not searching. So it's not like when you first had to learn how to Google, and people don't think of Google as a skill, but it is. Like it took a little while to figure out how to get exactly what you wanted. But you won't be searching anymore. You'll be asking, and you'll be asking questions. They'll be like, no, well, what neighborhood should I live in? Given that these are my interests, and I was talking to someone the other day. What he does is he describes, he doesn't even, it used to be just a little while ago, it was like prompt engineering, like how to say the thing. Now people are just doing things where you just talk for 20 minutes into an otter about, what you want something to do. And then you upload that into Claude and you ask Claude to write a prompt so not to write the thing, but to write the prompt that gets you the thing. And then it does it. And it's like pretty good. And it does all the parameters. It does all the angles and corners because it knows how to prompt itself. And you're just sort of nattering on, and it'll write the prompt. So it's going to be a lot easier to use it. What people sort of see, like Microsoft has been, working on Copilot, and they're starting, they are doing Copilot for marketing, sales, and finance. And they specifically looked for companies where, it's basically high toil. So, an accountant can spend 10 hours a week reconciling for like an average business. Copilot gets it down to 10 minutes. Like that is amazing. When you connect Copilot to your finance system. And so, what they've seen is that the moment people recognize and realize that they're saving 11 minutes a day, that's when people go from, that's the threshold for people to become experimenters, where they're like, I wonder if I
Because
can
there's a
do
productive
this.
outcome. So there's something tangible that
Yeah.
they're actually noticing, which is incentivizing to
Yeah.
learn
Well,
the
it's
thing.
like the path seems to be exposure
Uh-huh.
leads to curiosity. So then you start playing around personally, recipes, and you might make a meme or two. And then once you spend a certain amount of time with it, then you start doing stuff that matters to you. And you ask the question before you get started. Oh, I wonder, could it do this for me? And what's really exciting about this time period is that in terms of generative AI, with the exception of some tech companies that make AI, like everybody's on the starting blocks, like everyone all around the world. So it's like everyone who's listening, you are not behind. You are not behind. Like, and it's just getting started. So you're not behind. Everybody's in the same place. Everyone just got started. And so it's really about like, playing around with it. A friend of mine calls it FAFO, FAFO, which stands for curse word, around, and find out. So like,
Fuck around and find.
And that you just FAFO. He's like, just FAFO, just FAFO, just FAFO. And
Which
then
is,
there's this moment where you're like, oh, maybe I could do this.
when you think about it, it even ties into what we were talking about before. This is like the crux of what it means to be human. This is how we've learned from an evolutionary perspective what works and what doesn't, is we fuck around and find out, trial and error. And that's like that actually getting into it, trying different things is central to the learning process, right? And it's that way with AI, and it's been that way forever.
And it's probably that way with psychedelics. For sure, it was that way with the first person who ate lobster. Because you would look at that and you'd be like,
really?
Can I eat that? I'm gonna try eat that. So everything. I love what you just said. Yeah, like being human is all about the FAFO.
Right.
That's what we do. We FAFO everything. Yeah.
That's the crux of it. Well, Nichol, I know you have to run, and you've been so gracious with your time. We've gone a few minutes past. I would love to do a follow-up, because I feel like we're just sort of getting into some really fun and rich dialogue. But if folks want to learn more about your work, it's NicholBradford.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the best place to find out about my work.
Okay. Nichol Bradford.com. And then the book is Slipstream, that you're working on, or that's coming out.
Yeah, that I'm working on, and it's really it's sort of like it brings it all together.
Well, when you publish and it's out, we could do another interview and go even deeper then into the book and kind of the topics and things that you've covered, because I can't wait to read it and see how you put all these things together. I'm really curious.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. The psychedelic space is evolving every day, and we have a ton of amazing content that's coming out, and subscribing is the best way to keep up to date with all of that great content.